Hey everybody, it's Tim Larkin here. You are about to see my interview with Craig Douglas of ShivWorks. Craig has a really interesting background. I mean, just tremendous background in training, defensive tactics, and all sorts of hand-to-hand combatives to some of the best agencies, both law enforcement, intelligence, and government agencies throughout. The guy has a stellar reputation. I was really looking forward to talking with him. But it's a great journey that he has from a really troubled youth, as he grew up. He had felonies that he got involved with, all sorts of stuff. He was bullied. Then bullied other people. He then had to go into the military. The military turned him around, went into law enforcement, undercover narcotics, really understanding violence on a whole different level. And the way he talks about the subject is really, really interesting. You're going to find a lot of great takeaways on what to focus on and what not to focus on when it comes to your self-protection, how some people in the industry are just, really missing the point. And Craig's sober approach to using the tool of violence was really just present throughout the whole interview. So I'm looking really forward to it. Now, listen, if you are ready to start to put together your plan, especially for this coming year here, you're going to want to get the free report that we have at surviveviolence.com. It covers every aspect of violence that you have to be concerned with. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is give us your email. So surviveviolence.com, start putting a plan together to minimize the chance of violence coming to you and your family's life. Now, my interview with Craig. Craig, thanks so much for doing the interview, brother. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite some time. We have a lot of mutual friends, you and I. This is our first meeting, but I really like your approach. You said some things in some prior interviews, and from what people have told me about your training, that I think my people will really get a lot out of. I think probably you did such a good job with your background in Jeff's interview that I don't want to make you redo the whole thing. But what was highlighted is, if I could I wrote this out so you make it easy. What I found interesting about it, and you cover as much or as little of these areas as possible, was, you were introduced to violence early on. You were bullied. You became a bully. You got in trouble with the law. You were sent to military school. And your positive role model through the male role model through the whole thing was your grandfather.
That's correct.
And I guess what I'd like to set up is I love for people to understand what motivates, what early things in life happen that motivate you to be where you are today. So how did all of these early life challenges, and whichever ones you want to pick or go over, how did that help you become, create the mindset that you have, create the training methodologies that you have? And how did that positive male role model, which I think is really important, which I think a lot of men are missing today, how did that help you in troubled times?
Yeah. So my story is basically, and I've said this before, and I probably said it in the interview with Jeff. I'm kind of like Daniel LaRusso. I was the skinny kid with the birthmark, and I was picked on. 1974, I'm 55 years old now. So I was 6 years old then. Some kids got me down on a playground, beat me up pretty badly. And I've been beat up several times before, but this one was really bad. I mean, I was surrounded by a bunch of other kids, jeering, laughing. One kid got on top of me, punched me in the face a couple times. I turned away, typical, that's what everybody does. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu exploits that. He back mounts me, punches me in the back of the head, and this is on a basketball court, grabs me by the hair and starts driving my face against the concrete and the asphalt, trying to get the red stuff off, talking about the birthmark. So I go home, and my mother had not married my stepfather yet, so we're living with my grandparents. My mother and I, we had a kind of a mother-in-law residence that was attached to my grandfather's house. But as expected, I mean, I was just, humiliated and emasculated and, angry and just had all these feelings. It had been going like that for a while, but this is like the seminal event. My grandfather looked at me, and he was a career law enforcement officer in the state of Mississippi, kind of a legendary guy. In fact, everybody who I worked for in my law enforcement career on the Mississippi Gulf Coast had worked for my grandfather at some point, either with him as the chief of Pascagoula Police Department or as the chief deputy for the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, which is where I did my career. But he took me, and Granddad was an old school, back in the 40s and 50s, Shotokan martial artist, and trained with a bunch of Japanese guys. I was training, had been training. He didn't train anymore at the time. He trained at the Mobile Karate Club, which was an old school, hard, before there's any protective equipment type gym. But anyway, he took me, and he told my mother, he's going to learn how to protect himself. He's going to learn. This is not going to happen to him again. And against her wishes, because my mother was absolutely, violence is never the answer for anything. He enrolled me in a Taekwondo class. That's all there was available then. And I trained in that class 4 days a week, 5 days a week sometimes, from 1974 until 1981 or 82. And then I started, I'd do the kids class from like 3:30 to 5. And because I was so into it and I was talented, my instructors, they had like, their dojo was part of their house. So they had a tiny little apartment that they lived in, and it was part of the building that the dojo was in. So what would happen was I started doing the adult class. So I'd eat dinner with them. It was kind of like martial arts daycare, obviously, before that was really a thing. But I would eat with them, and I'd do the adult class. I would train at that old hard Taekwondo school from 3:30 in the afternoon till 8 or 8:30 at night, with a dinner break. And I did that through, from 6 to 12 or 13 years old. I got a black belt, got my nose caved in when I was a kid on my black belt test. It was a real rough and tumble, school. It was very, very unforgiving, very physically demanding. And then I got into some other martial arts. I got into some Okinawan stuff. I did a little bit of Japanese jiu-jitsu, and throughout my teens, and everywhere I went, I switched elementary schools twice, and then from elementary school to middle school. Each time I went to a new place, again, the same problems would start, and I'd have to fight. So after a few years of that, now all of a sudden, I'm not getting bullied like I was. And then what I noticed was if I got a hint, even a whiff, I got really good at detecting any kind of aggression early on, and then I would get preemptive. And then because that felt good, I kind of switched and became the bully throughout my teens. Became a troubled youth. Had 3 felonies that I was looking at when I was 14 years old. So went to live with my dad in South Florida, very troubled. Got involved with some gang activity in South Florida in Broward County. And finally, the consensus was we've got to do something. We've got to have some kind of intervention. And even my grandfather kind of lost me at this point, but they decided to send me to military school for my last 2 years of high school. And that rigid environment, uncompromising for the slightest infraction in behavior, that more or less straightened me out. And then I did a 3-year enlistment in the Army, served in a mechanized infantry unit and the Ranger Regiment. And then between those 5 years, kind of got my shit together, and became a functional human being, got out, came home, was a bouncer for 8 or 9 months, and started my law enforcement career and did that for 21 years. And then I retired. So that's kind of the story. I think the list of the martial arts that I haven't trained in actively for a number of years is probably shorter than the ones I have trained in. There's very few things that I've not been exposed to and trained in quite a bit. So that's the early years, the formative journeys, victimhood, bullying, becoming the bully, understanding both sides of aggression, having a patriarchal figure who is in law enforcement and then, ending up, in the military with that. And then when I came home again, it was just a natural progression. Actually, I didn't want to be a cop. I'd used my college money from the Army, and I was wanting to go to work for one of the intelligence agencies. So I majored in East Asian studies and I minored in Japanese. And I was a full-time college student while I was a full-time cop. So I did both. And at the time, the big push was, hey, we're really moving towards economic intelligence, and Japan is going to be the next big enemy, and the war is going to, the new Cold War is, the economy, and you need to learn how to speak Japanese because they're the next big enemy. So that's what I was doing. And the law enforcement career was secondary to that. It was a means to an end. But what happened was that kind of changed my life forever and changed my life path was when I started working at the Sheriff's Department in 1990. There was very little in the way, and I started working at the correctional facility, the county jail. There's very little in the way of intermediate weapons. This was even pre-OC days. So we had 36-inch hickory sticks and us, and that was really it. And the sticks only came out when they started burning mattresses and things like that. Other than that, it's you and them. Right. But I remember, because I trained some judo and jiu-jitsu, and I'd actually done this a couple of times in bar fights. When I was in the Ranger Regiment, I had a pretty good rear naked choke. This old judo guy taught me, and I slapped that on an inmate, and probably within the first 6 months, put him to sleep, and that was like a magic act. That was a trick that nobody understood. Everybody's like, "Oh, wow, I can't move."
It's hard for people to understand that because of jiu-jitsu these days.
And this is 1990.
It was like
this is 1992.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, well, I'll show you how to do it. So I showed a few people how to do it. And then a slot came open for a PPCT defensive tactics instructor school. So they sent me to that school.
It was Dillman, right?
Yeah, no. That was pressure point control tactics.
Right.
The larger brand. Dillman was a pressure point guy, but PPCT management systems they still do, had a brand of training that really kind of took over law enforcement in the.
I remember that. During those years.
So they had a DT instructor school, so they ended up sending me to that, and then I started teaching at our regional police academy in 1992 as a collateral duty to being with the Sheriff's Department. And what happened was I ended up becoming the lead DT instructor and took that program over. So the longer I stayed, the more my emphasis shifted from, getting in the intelligence community to training and experience in my law enforcement career. I went from being a correctional officer to being a patrol officer. And then I had most of my career was spent in narcotics, but I had a 2-year undercover stint in that period of time where some fairly formative things happened that kind of informed the creation of ShivWorks. And, those experiences along with teaching and training constantly, I ended up doing 21 years, and doing a career and starting this training business. I'll talk more about that later. Kind of as therapy, if you will, to make sense of some of the things that happened in the 2-year undercover tenure that I absolutely had no training solution for, and almost cost me my life. And I started working on these problems, and then I started writing about them online probably 1999, 2000. And so people took interest, and that led to product collaborations, which invariably led to some DVDs that I put out, which invariably led to me doing in-person training. And it was always something, I mean, there was never any marketing plan for this. It was always something that people were interested in, they asked for, and I was having fun with it. And I was getting reps in delivering the content. And then I did that for 9 years, and it got to a point where it was like, you know what, I'm enjoying this, and I'm making more money literally in a weekend than I am at the sheriff's department in a month, even as a captain, which is what I retired at. And I decided to punch out. I had 21 years, 3 years in the Army, and then I bought a year of unused leave, which gave me a 25-year, 50% pension, and started doing this full time. And that was 2011. So this year I'm wrapping up my 12th year of teaching full time. Next year is my 13th year of teaching full time, but it's my 22nd year of teaching under the brand ShivWorks. And now I teach in 48 states, 11 countries outside of the US, 4 branches of the military, 6 federal law enforcement agencies, and we hold a small but distinct contract within a section of the intelligence community organized under DOD that we've held now for 8 years. So
that says everything you need to say with where you've been since 2011 doing. I mean, you don't get into those places, sustain a contract in those places unless you're providing content that these guys need, because they, and a lot of them are, they're always looking for the new thing, so they're jumping all the time. So the fact that you've been sustained says that. I also want to clarify for a lot of the listeners, you're about I'm actually older,
okay.
But we went through the same thing.
Yeah.
There were no options. The options for martial arts were limited, in our, back then. But I don't want to leave them thinking Taekwondo, like 2023 Taekwondo. Back
Right.
then, you're banging, you were hitting people, you were doing, and you had people, because I know the same thing with me. I was a Navy kid, so for me it was every base the Marines taught something, and that's what you would jump in. But it was always, I mean, what's so crazy with this current group, I have a 13-year-old right now, and his experience at school is very different than mine was. I mean, there's literally zero contact. If anything happens, both get kicked out. There's no outlet for that, and there's no learning. Now, pros and cons of that, 2 things I got out of it. You understood what it was to be hit. You understood, how to use violence. And then it was something that just happened, and it was a human nature thing. The other thing that I just want to touch on, because I think probably, I'm just guessing, I'm thinking this really helped. You said a couple of things that you were forced to understand human nature, and the side of human nature that gives, like you would say, hey, I know through experience in this new environment that I'm in, I'm reading all these precursors, and I'm just going to take action before it gets out of hand and let people know who I am, type thing. I think that is so underrated in training, that people really don't understand human nature and the importance of it. And I'm sure you're going to get into it with some of your experiences in as a narcotics officer, because I've dealt with a lot of those guys. And I mean, you have to have your wits about you, especially if you were undercover for 2 years, So anyways, I don't want to interrupt you. I just wanted to kind of highlight for people.
Absolutely. No, that I agree with you that Tim, and I think this statement I'm getting ready to make is going to resonate with you. I find it ironic that the vast majority of people who teach and advocate for self-defense are the people who are the most predisposed to the physical outcome. And we do things like we say words that we don't really have any kind of training modalities for. Like, how often have you seen, Cobra Kai gi dude look at his class and say, all right, fellas, we should always be trying to de-escalate, because the fight you win is the one that you never take part of. Now, if that doesn't work, and that's about all the training you get after someone uses the buzzword of de-escalation. And what I find ironic is, if we really were honest to the problem of self-defense, probably the people we should be recruiting are the nerdy kids who had to weaponize humor and wit to talk their way out of things like getting swirled in the toilet by the athletes. We could probably learn a lot of things from them that are valuable for self-defense. Yeah, and even the word, right? I'm a big fan of things being actionable, and I think in the self-defense business, we say a lot of things that are well intentioned, but they simply aren't actionable. They simply aren't. You should always de-escalate. What does that mean? Is de-escalation being a fit, capable looking dude, and when somebody is in an interview process trying to decide if they're going to select you for a violent crime, and you set your posture, you weight shift forward, you grab their eyes, and you say, this is getting ready to get expensive for you. And because you are capable of great violence, and because it's authentic, they think about their decision and they're like, not that guy, and they walk. Is that de-escalation? Is de-escalation if you rear end somebody, they get out, you get out, they're screaming at you, you motherfucker, blah, and you say, hey man, that was my fault. I wasn't paying attention. I've got a kid in the hospital and I'm really worried. I am sorry. And you create connection with that person, and you try and elicit empathy from them. And you make them go, all right, man, just let's just call a police officer. And I get it. I got a kid too. Is that de-escalation? Right? They both are. How do you teach people how to do that? How do you teach people? And I use the phrase, how do you teach people social literacy to be able to navigate those moments? How do you give them? People will ask, I want to have confidence to be able to give that steely-eyed glare that you just described and make a guy just walk off. Well, confidence comes from competence. You will be confident if you are competent, and the only way you're going to be competent is if you physically train and you test yourself. Okay, that's like the mindset discussion. Again, well-intentioned stuff that more often than not is actionable. There are two words in the industry that people think are verbs: mindset and awareness. I'm going to aware my way out of this dark alley. I'm going to mindset the shit out of Tim Larkin when he's top-mounted me and he's punching me in the face. I'm not going to mindset my way out of anything, and I'm not going to aware my way out of anything. So I think a lot of this stuff, that people parrot and say, is lip service that is not actionable because there's not a physical mechanism to actually train that. And that's one of the areas that I really emphasize, because again, my own personal experiences, my own lived experience in my formative years, and then my professional experience in law enforcement, particularly in as an undercover officer. There are some things that having moral flexibility served me well. And I tell people all the time who do a ShivWorks class, and it's by design a program of instruction and an experience, and it's a potent experience. Changes a lot of people, like literally changes their brain chemistry because the way we do the training. But they're like, hey man, you're such a good dude. I'm like, you know what? Don't conflate me being good at something with being good. All right. That's something else right there. And being good didn't serve me well necessarily in an undercover capacity in situations with, again, you know, right, wrong, or different, my moral ambiguity was able to carry me through an evening. So I like getting into that stuff with people in training. And I like creating circumstances where people can experience that for themselves. I think personally, I think that is the most underserved and undervalued component of modern self-defense with or without weapons. And I don't think we have a good handle on really how to do that, other than the way I do it. And I'm not saying that's perfect either. Which is experientially facilitate the experience for them. Have a discussion about what just happened. Let other people do the same. Let them watch each other and talk about the differences in outcomes. Who's right? Who's wrong? What does that even mean? What does right or wrong mean? I think that stuff is, that to me, the moral and emotional components of what drive decision making, which drives strategies, tactics, and techniques. That stuff, that's the root of all of this. And I find that, I think that's the next big thing. I really do. And I think it's largely unexplored.
I absolutely agree with you. The reason I really resonated with a lot of what you said was because you were in a world like some of my biggest learning jumps. You said something to Jeff that really resonated. In the early days, all you cared about was kicking ass and teaching people to kick ass, and you only wanted to train operators and people like that. And then you're kind of disappointed in something. We'll talk about that later. You made some great points on that. But I only wanted to train people that I could be completely hardcore and physical with, that were going to do a job. I didn't really think about ramifications, didn't really think about, outside of the mission where we were in. It was really easy. It was very easy, the protocols we were given. Then when you take it outside in the real world and you're going back and forth, you realize, oh shit, a lot of the stuff that got me from when I'd go to school, and I'd have to, and my mom always said, I got to give it to you. She said, every time we went to a new place, I think it was just to placate us because we had to leave all our friends. Yeah. She would always say, you got to give it 6 months, give it 6 months to get it. And what she meant was, and I remember most times I would come in, I would just observe for 6 months, and I'd see who the groups were and all that. And that negated potential violence for me in such a long, but it was just a survival thing as a Navy kid. You knew, hey, what I did last time didn't work. I'm going to do this time. As I'm teaching civilians, when I come out, most of them are so unfamiliar with violence. It's really strange. From when I first started, it was a lot easier because most people had some sort of a physical confrontation in their life. Now I'm training a lot of people that literally have never had anything happen in their life. And the easiest thing to train is the physical, the striking and all that. The hardest thing to train is context. When would it ever be justifiable for you to use this information? And oh, by the way, did your behavior get you here? Unconsciously get you here because you weren't understanding what was going on here. And some of my biggest teachers have either been undercover narcotics officers that I've worked with around the world, just how they've interacted. And then I've gone to the federal penitentiaries and I've been talking to leaders of the Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, and also the corrections officers in there, Black Guerrilla family. And I've learned so much from those guys that would talk to me. Well, listen, it's not condoning anything, but for them to survive in that world and what they need to know about human nature. And, even talking to, I talked to Sammy the Bull and how they were very, very specific in how they used violence. It was to achieve a goal. They really understood human nature at a very base level, and that's something that I think if you can give that to your client, the idea to like I remember Michael Thompson, one of the founding members of Aryan Brotherhood, said to me, he goes, oh yeah, he goes, our motto was, warm smile, cold heart, and how to use stuff. And it's hard for people because I never give the impression, I tell everybody all the time, I'm not condoning this, I'm not saying, but there's good information here. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the corrections officers at first that helped me, because they trained a lot of them, they were reluctant when I started asking these questions because they were taking it like, oh, you're saying that we can't control these guys. Or, no. Yeah. But what about this? And then the corrections officers started telling me, oh yeah, you know what? they think like this and they do that. Nobody's ever asked me that question, but you're absolutely right. That's exactly what they do. I just think that's such useful information. I can just tell just by the way you present that that's running in the background with you. And yet you're absolutely right. It's so hard to teach people or let them understand the value of that information.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cumbersome to teach. What do those drills look like? That's been a big focus with me is teaching guys functional social literacy and to some extent verbal agility. We have this archetype of what we think of as an interdisciplinary tactician. And that's a guy who essentially has all these problem solving modalities. And he has the shooting skills of a USPSA grandmaster. He has the hand-to-hand skills of a top 10 UFC fighter. And he has the verbal agility and the social literacy of a good comic who still works in dive bars and clubs and casinos on the road 40 weeks a year and has to deal with hecklers and has to do that and still be able to come back to the same venue and play again. And when you have, we see that in a given moment, a well-placed word and a well-placed shot are equally potent given the scenario. And understanding the power of all of these problem-solving modalities and figuring out, okay, we know that's important. How do we teach people how to do this? That to me is making the training truly interdisciplinary and not making it about the physical or weapons-based outcome. Yeah. So I think that's very underserved in our community, and we like in the coursework, the extreme close quarter concepts coursework, which is kind of the flagship, one of the flagship courseworks, pieces of coursework that we're known for, which is 26 hours roughly over 2.5 days of what we call an overview of functional handgun skills at 0 to 5 feet, which requires that interdisciplinary approach to problem solving. So it's not just a wrestling problem. It's not just a gun problem. It's something in between. It's not a stand-up problem. It's not a ground problem. It's something in between. And it's not kinetic or non-kinetic. Quite often, it's something in between. And teaching people that part of it, and as importantly, putting them into a playpen where they are allowed to pretty much do anything they want to each other, with obviously exceptions with the safety equipment. But you don't know what somebody's going to do. Somebody could quite often will associate the speed of an approaching stranger with hostility. Okay, so you're walking down the street, someone's just running towards you. But we'll have people that run towards somebody, and you can see the body alarm reaction when I say, all right, and begin. And somebody will start running towards this person, and the first thing you see them do is they'll reach back and they'll start going for a draw, and that person will run up and stop and say, I lost my daughter. I lost my daughter. What are you doing? Why are you pointing a fucking gun at me? Are you crazy? Yep. Just to teach them that, you can't, correlation is not causation. You can't pin speed of approach directly into intention. You can't. But we'll see people who've conditioned themselves to initiate a draw sequence based on the speed and perception of intention. So we have them do this, and you can see oh shit. And then somebody else will come up and they'll be holding a phone and saying, what the hell is wrong with you? This guy lost his daughter. You're trying to draw a fucking gun. Did you take her? And now all of a sudden the guy shifts back. Did you take my daughter? No. So now there we are, we're armed. We initially body alarmed, telegraphed that we were carrying a gun, realized, shit, I made a mistake. I read this wrong. Somebody else comes up, shifts intention back towards you. Now there are two people and it's being videoed, possibly aligned against you. And they have to navigate that.
Yeah,
So
and those are things that people just don't consider. They because of the way most people are trained, they think it's a binary answer. And the nuances that you're talking about are probably the most valuable thing, you can give somebody, because they're not, when they people always ask me the difference between, what do you train military and law enforcement versus us? You must train them the real stuff. And I say, no, actually, my civilian clients get the real thing. I'm very limited with what I can teach military and law enforcement. What I mean by that is you got a force continuum that you got to deal with, and then you've got rules of engagement, and they have mission profiles. They see some of the same profiles time in and time out, and so you spend time working on that. Civilians, you never know what's going to happen. It can, I have no idea when violence comes to them or potential violence comes to them, what the parameters are going to be, and so it's a really a full education you want to give them, and a big part of it is being able to. And I hate, like I said, I'm the same way. I hate awareness and all those and mindset and everything. It's just more like it's more you have to pay attention to what's going on. You have to pay attention to what people are saying and be able to make those decisions. And that's, to me, is the inner. I guess probably as we've evolved, and that's why I really want to talk to you is you've been doing this for so many years. You get to the point and you get your feedback from everybody, and you realize a lot of it came down to making a decision, and being able to make that decision. And yes, if the decision is, I've got to use my training, then damn it, you better have a good skill set there and you better put the time in. But worse is if you have the skill and training and everything and you misread the situation, well, now you got a whole other problem if it wasn't justified, and you got this situation you got to deal with. So it's just, to me, it's just a much more, and especially in this day and age, we've got these crazy last years that we've had where people have been put themselves in situations. And how many videos have you seen of somebody not understanding what's going on, and they misread the whole situation and got themselves into a shit show.
I think it's even more problematic now, Tim, because there's less in-person socialization than ever. If you look at some of the generation, and every generation has its issues, but one of the things we see with young people is they have some of the highest levels of anxiety and reported mental illness of any generation to date. And I mean, it is through the roof. There are all kinds of theories about why this is. One theory is that, well, they just report it more, right? That's one theory, and that could be true. But another theory is that this Gen Z, which is everybody from 1994, 96, I can't remember forward, they were not raised without an internet. They've always had an internet and they've always had a phone. And because of this, so much of their socialization is remote. They just simply don't have the ability of previous generations to navigate, shifts in tone, nuances in tone, nuances in facial expressions. They're just not as socially literate. I wouldn't use the word autistic, but I mean, that might be a good sort of way to think about a lot of those issues. But I've noticed that in coursework that younger people seem to, as a generation, struggle with the social literacy and talking piece and reading things that are ambiguous. They really seem to struggle with that a lot. And everybody struggles with it unless you train it. People who do well in the coursework and that piece of the coursework that navigate that well. People in sales, they tend to navigate that well, right? People that still sell things, goods or services, face to face, have to close. ABC always be closing. Those people, they do well. They navigate that well. They understand that. I think I tell people all the time, maybe what you need to do is spend less time on the range, and you know what, go volunteer at a homeless shelter. That's a relatively safe place for you to get a lot of reps with a population that you're probably not familiar with, maybe intimidated by, and just get some reps talking to them. Just be around them, see what that's like. Same thing working in autism camp. When I teach body language, pre-assault cues in particular, and we're talking about some of them, I say, this content is not absolute, and there are a lot of things that people on the spectrum do that to people that train self-defense might be interpreted as pre-assaultive. Lack of eye contact, odd spatial norms, ticking and stemming gestures. And if you don't want to make a decision that you may regret for the rest of your life, maybe you as a lawful CCW holder might want to go spend time at an autism camp just for a weekend and see what those people look like. I'm a fan of, if you're gonna, especially if you're going to carry a firearm in the public space, I'm a fan of people upticking their social literacy and making an attempt at least at becoming a little bit more well-adjusted and a little bit more cosmopolitan as far as just the what. I'm real critical of law enforcement, but one thing law enforcement really does well. They don't shoot well, they don't fight well, they're not fit. However, they manage chaos while armed from a massive swath of humanity, from the highest tiers of income to the lowest tiers of income and everything in between. They get reps on that. They really do. And they, as a demographic, they navigate that part really well. They do. They navigate that part really well. And they understand that. I think cops do that probably better than any demographics. So regular citizens, soldiers, spooks, whoever. I think they do that real well. With the exception of case officers. Case officers, obviously, it's what they do.
Yeah.
So they're recruit assets. So they do that. They do that real well. But
they're forced to have interaction with the public. And it's funny because I noticed that's the same problem. I'm sure you're hearing the same thing. A lot of kids coming to the academies now, for the police academies, if we can still get them to come. That's a big problem. Is a lot of them face-to-face communication is really intimidating for them. And they also, the same thing that I told we were talking about before, they literally most of them have not had physical situations.
Yeah.
And it's really strange. Like when I see some of these kids, like when I first came and I met my wife, she was at the TAC officer. It was early 2000s. And it was great. It's your typical classes that, I would expect, everybody's fine. And she showed me one of the ones, recently. And it's just like, wow, completely different type of candidate that they have to go. And they're seeing the problem on the streets. Having them go out, the new recruits go out and engage in the public is really something they're having to deal with, because they literally haven't had to talk to each other like this.
Yeah, they're on their phones.
Yeah. And again, we risk to sound like old guys and we're complaining about technology. That's not it at all. I mean, I love the technology. It's been very useful to me on a lot of things, but the ability in our business to communicate and to really figure out the nuances of what's going on is absolutely critical. And so you have to be able to put that. It wasn't such a, it's funny, in my early part of the career, when I was training early on this stuff, it wasn't as unique as it is now. Now it's even more needed than it's been.
I think so too. I do. I think so too.
That leads me to, I just want to also, you made some great statements in Jeff's thing that I want to touch on, but I want you to just do how, well, I think you already gave, one of the questions I was going to give you was, how did your undercover work shape your approach to training? I think we kind of covered that. It was you're going back. If you have more to say on that, great. I just didn't want you to have to repeat yourself.
It was fairly formative. That 2 years. It's interesting to reflect back on the time period in that, I had there, there's so many there's so many ways that 2 years informed me. You know, buying drugs every day, playing somebody that I was not, or arguably am. I mean, it wasn't much of a jump for me to go to undercover work because 10 years previously, you know, I did have 3 felonies on
Right.
me. So I have been described by some people as a law-abiding bad
Yeah.
guy. You
No, it's
know,
great.
that may be apropos. But I liked the work. I liked the challenge. I thrived in it. The uncertainty of it is really quick. You know, you have to make good decisions, best decisions that you can. Sometimes you can make good decisions and it still turns out like shit. You know, there's so many things I did learn, like the power of language. That's huge. I have a reputation for speaking fairly precisely when I teach, and I can remember an instance in undercover work where I was loaned out to an agency, and this is an instance with very minor consequence compared to several others that had pretty major consequence. But I'm loaned out, and it's a dry day. So when you're loaned out buying drugs to an agency, you're usually living in a hotel room, usually a low rent motel, kind of hopefully away from where you're buying drugs. You've got to buy a vehicle. You're away from your home jurisdiction, 200-300 miles for 90 days. And the expectation is daily you're buying drugs, or daily you're getting introduced to hopefully buy drugs, or you're buying guns, or you're maybe doing human trafficking, you're buying people, or it's a prostitute, whatever. Okay. But you're operating in an undercover capacity. I remember this one day, and it's just a dry hole. I can't buy from anybody. I'm getting frustrated. There's an expectation. And I see a guy on the corner, and you know, I hadn't bought in probably a couple of hours of just trolling around the projects, buying crack. Finally, this guy kind of looks at me, kind of gives me that chin lift thing, you know, pull over. And I really want to buy from this guy. And he looks at me, looks in the car, you know. He's like, "What do you need, man?" I said, "I need a 40 piece. So I need $40 worth of crack cocaine." I said, "I need a 40 piece. He's like, "Ain't the police are you?" I said, "No, man, but the police is right around the corner. So hurry up and sell me something, dude." Because I'm trying to create some urgency in this guy to hopefully get him to sell to me. And he said, "Police around the corner?" I said, "Yeah, man, I just saw a patrol car." And when I said patrol car, because
Gave it away.
nobody says that, but it was out of my mouth. His head snapped down. He sucked his teeth. He said, "Gone." And I was done. I was like, fuck. So just that, I mean, it happened. It was out of my mouth, right? And I was trying to create some urgency in that guy because I was frustrated, you know, because I couldn't buy that day, right? So I was trying to make some shit up, hopefully to get this guy to sell to me. And I made that one word lapse and done.
Killed you
So
right away.
minor consequence, I didn't buy drugs, big deal, you know. But that his head snapped back on me so quick, you know, that from that point forward, I was super mindful about literally every single word I said and how I said it. And that kind of followed me into my instructorship and the way I teach. And so that's a lesson. I mean, there are all kinds of lessons and all kinds of other ways. I was robbed 9 times at gunpoint in 2 years of UC work. So I'm fairly intimately familiar with what robbery looks like. And most of those were business as usual robberies. And in a couple of cases, I went back literally the next day to a guy who had stuck a pistol underneath my chin, told me to get the fuck off his block, went back the next day and bought crack cocaine from that guy 24 hours later. Again, people were like, "Why would you do that?" Because that's what crackheads and addicts do.
Yeah.
And there was an expectation, at least in the 90s, that street level undercover work was just rough trade. You took your lumps, and you cannot be risk averse and do that work. You have to be highly, highly risk tolerant, and I am and I always was. So, and I enjoyed the challenge of that. I enjoyed, there was an ego thing with me, right? That,
Right.
yeah, I can take a guy. I've got the balls to let a guy grab me by the hair, stick a gun under my chin, shit talk me, come back the next day and make a case on dude, right? It's a thing. Are you mentally resilient enough or crazy enough to do stuff like that? Because that's authenticity, right? I have
Yeah.
this. People hear me say all the time, life's a dope deal, and I believe that life's a dope deal because buying drugs is not really about buying drugs. Buying drugs is about selling yourself. It's all about authenticity. So everything comes down to that, right?
Right.
I tell people all the time, look, if you can sell it, you can do it. Well, can I look at a guy and go, it's going to get expensive for you? You probably can't do that because it's
Yeah.
not authentic to you. You can't sell that shit. This guy over here can,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You
And,
know,
and that's such a valuable skill. I mean, dude, you immersed yourself in it. I mean, having people put guns intimately on you like that and everything. But it must have taught you a lot about the idea. You said something that I don't know if everybody picked up. The idea was business as usual, meaning you probably had to decide, okay, I see what's going on here. Yeah, this sucks, but this is truly just a robbery, or this is truly something
Robert.
because of your background. Because you're always looking, okay, is this the psychopath? Is this the guy that's actually going to use violence instead? And you're looking for those triggers as well. And I mean, be able to process that like that is just that's amazing.
So out of those 9 robberies, I didn't comply in only one, and that was an in-car robbery that resulted in a round that discharged about an inch from my head. I've lost some hearing in this ear. Fighting over a gun in a car on a $40 crack deal, and the other thing about it is turned out okay. I mean, did cross the center column, actually pinned me against the B pillar, was punching me, and I was holding the gun off me, but I couldn't move. And that event created both products and training that ShivWorks is fairly well known for. He got tired of it, bailed, and we ID'd him on video, snatched him up to the projects. I think his mom's house, like 12, 13 hours later. But people will ask me, okay, well, what was it? Why that one? Why did you not comply in that one? And I'm like, didn't feel like the others. Now I can make up some shit and I could say, I saw a narrowing of the eyes that I never saw before, or he said a certain thing. That's all horseshit. And your mind will make up things, right, to fill in a story that actually makes sense to you. So you have to even be careful about your recall. All I know to tell people when they ask me, hey, out of 9 robberies, you actually went for some 1-0 on an actual real gun disarm. What was it about that one that made you go for it? Didn't feel like the others. That's all I know.
Oh,
Did not feel like the others. And the other ones, were fairly simple. You meant money, white boy. Dude, they get to stepping.
yep.
Okay. They were business as usual robbers. I mean, people get robbed. Robbery is a violent felony, but people get robbed in housing projects and ghettos every day as part of their life.
Yeah.
So when you're immersed in that, like I was for 2 years on a daily basis, it becomes business as usual.
Yeah.
I mean, it got to a point, 4th or 5th time. All right, yeah, he robbed me. I need some more buy money. And we'd go 6 blocks away and try and buy crack over there.
Yeah. I mean
So
that's a skill set that just people, yeah, that's so unique. Every time I talk to, somebody who's done undercover work like yourself, there's always that one where they say, oh, this is where I said the wrong, I said the wrong word. I remember one of my buddies was undercover with outlaw motorcycle gang in Australia. And his mistake was he was watching Australian rules football game, and it was his home team. And his whole legend was he was from this other part of the thing, and they couldn't understand why he's getting pissed. that this one group was losing, and he quickly recovered from that. But all you guys have come back and you always say, yeah, that was my one freebie, and man, I locked it down right after that,
Okay.
because I thought I had my shit together, but damn, I almost that could have undone me. And so it's really interesting to hear, one, you're really well trained, but then you do have that slip up, and it's how you react to it. If you're
Okay.
able to get past it, and then what do? You really lock it down after, because you understand the importance of communication and nuance on people, which
We
is
had I was fined for this dope unit one time, and they did a really poor tech install. The equipment was not well concealed, and I've got a guy in the car with me, and I pick him up, and we're making the block, let him off, and he's going to get in the car back with me. He's got a little bit of dope, again, $40-$50 for the crack cocaine. Dude probably wants to smoke with me. Can't do that. Video's running. I need to get the dope, get rid of him. Once the dope's in my custody, I can't retransfer a controlled substance back on video.
right.
The guy I just got it from. So I can't, because a lot of these guys are crack, they're addicts too, So if they go run you a rock, the expectation is, well, if I bring you a little bit of dope, we get to hit it. Can't do that. So there are all kinds of ways to work your way out of that. But anyway, we're kind of going back and forth, and he's getting antsy, and he goes to slide. He goes to slide the seat back, and the Sony, they had taken the Sony 8mm clamshell recorder that has the tapes in it that the mics and the board cams are wired to. That they just shoved that under the seats. When he slid a seat back, it just kind of fell out. So there are wires everywhere. There's a tape in there. You can see it spinning. There's a little green light, and he looks down at it and he says, "What the fuck is this?" And I looked at him. I said, "Man, I don't know, man. I just picked that up I just broke in a house a couple of days ago. You give me like $40 for it. You want that?"
Nice.
And it was enough. And he just kind of put it down and looked at me. I'm like, "Dude, you have it. I don't care. I need some money for it, man. Go run me another rock." No, and it was enough, right?
It's enough to go. Yeah, interrupted him.
Other things we used to do, like to not retransfer control. So different things I used to do. I'd get like a half a bottle of malt liquor, and I would drink a third of it. And I would go run around, and I'd get sweaty. So I smelled like malt. I smelled like a crackhead.
Right.
And I had that bottle quite often with me. I'd keep like a crumpled half pack of Newport cigarettes and maybe like $3 or $4, like in the console. But those are all offerings. It's basically tithing, because a lot of times I pull up, dude gets that whiff of malt liquor. I don't smell like the police. Everybody knows the police don't drink and drive. I smell like a freaking crackhead. They'd go run me a rock, they'd want to hit it back. I'd be like, "Nah, man, it's my girl's rock. I gotta go. It's her rock." "Nah, man, I did you right. Let me get you. Let me chip it a little bit." I'm like, "Nah, man, here, take the small liquor, bro." And having an offering right there, whether it was malt liquor, a half a crumple pack to $3 or $4, that was just enough to kind of pay the toll and get out, be cool with dude. So hopefully I can come back again tomorrow and buy from him again, so we get another sales case on this guy. So, little stuff like that would help, and it's just stuff you learn. It's stuff that's usually you learn in mentorship, if you're lucky, if you have somebody that's done that and they can give you some advice, and just because they have experience doesn't mean they're going to be able to transmit meaningful information, right? They can have all the experience in the world, but they can't translate that into a lesson. And again, it's not actionable. So I was fortunate. I had a couple of, I had one actually that one guy that had done a fair bit of UC work, undercover work with the Biloxi Police Department, kind of take me under his wing after I did my 2-week initial undercover school. And helped me out with some things and explain some things to me. And he actually covered me initially on probably like my first month, and would talk about what was happening, what I was doing, until I kind of got the training wheels can kind of come off. But I was lucky, and a lot of guys don't have that. You know, a lot of guys are just sent to a school and they go back to a drug unit. Nobody there has done the UC work. They're like, hey, man, you've been to school, go buy drugs, you know, and
Yeah.
there's
On the
zero.
job. Fuck.
Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of guys that work narcotics, but the guys who actually wear body wires, you know, and buy drugs or guns or bombs or people or thumb drives or whatever, the actual number of people that do that consistently, that's fairly small. That's fairly small. That's a fairly small number.
Well, all this, what's so great about this was I want people to hear all this because the physical training you do is excellent. It's really great, but I want them to understand what they're getting. You're getting far more than you're getting somebody that's lived it in many different ways, experienced, and you can have a lot of empathy towards people as they're learning this material, and you can also give them. You got 10 times what you need back there in case you have to give it to them, which I love instructors that just you don't have enough time to get what they can give you, and the nuances that you can put in. So you said a couple of things. I heard you say, I'll combine these two questions because it was excellent the way you said this with Jeff. And I'm talking about the Jeff Gonzalez interview, which I'll put a link to
Yeah, yeah.
in this because it's a great interview. And Jeff's a good friend. I love
Good
that
friend
guy.
of mine. Yeah, love him to
Um,
death.
you said it's far more rewarding for you to train a civilian enthusiast rather than armed professionals. And I
Yeah.
know exactly what you mean by that, but could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. People have a misconception that an armed profession and a profession of arms are the same thing. There are a lot of armed professions. I think there's really probably only one real profession of arms that would probably be the infantry. Outside of that, everybody else is kind of an armed profession, and I would include law enforcement. There are police officers who give no more attention or mind to the pistol on their hip than a carpenter gives to his hammer. They're not interested in it. They don't build skill with it other than on the job. In fact, the carpenter arguably uses his tools more in the course of his duty than the police officer does. So I think there's a belief that law enforcement officers and even people in the military are shooting and training and fighting enthusiasts. What I've seen is quite the opposite, and especially when it comes to combatives or martial arts style training, is that those populations are largely ambivalent and disinterested,
I was
and they just aren't into it. Where citizens, by the very nature of open enrollment training, are all volunteers and they're all interested. So the engagement and the interest from the average person that has chosen to pay their money and invest their time into learning this, I find the interaction I have with the time I spend with them, I find that far more rewarding, and I find that far more pleasant than training commandos and spooks and operators and agents and all these other types. I mean, you do get, make no mistake, there are high caliber people in those places, right? Very high caliber people. There are also ass clowns in this, and there is no there isn't a tier one special missions unit or a three-letter agency that does not have an ass clown or five that everybody is like, I don't know how you got here. They don't, right? I mean, that's
No,
the
it's amazing when you see that you go, how the fuck did they end up here?
yeah.
And then when you get over that illusion, I remember when I went into Buds, I saw that immediately. What I just did, not to toot my horn or anything, I had 2,500 guys were going after 2 slots back then. This is pre Big Seal days. This is in the 80s, early 80s. I worked my ass off to get one of those slots, and I got it. I show up to school, I show up to Buds and getting ready to everything, and there are guys there, and I was an officer. There are guys there washed out of flight school, washed out, and this was their second choice. I was like, what the, I couldn't believe that there were individuals like that. Like all I wanted was this, and I was 13 years old. That's all I prepped for. And you quickly get that washed out, and you see that throughout the military and law enforcement community. There are those stellar individuals
Yeah.
that are amazing, and they do put the time in, and they're excellent, and they're great. But I'm so surprised, and I would attribute it to the fact that they didn't have to make a self-sacrifice of putting their own money on the line, and really saying, hey, I really want to learn this. They were assigned this. This was something they were assigned, and maybe there's one or two of the guys in the unit that are really into it, but there's 8 other guys that are just like, okay, I gotta check the block.
Yep. Whereas with a citizen, that's a person that, I mean, all of them are they wouldn't be there.
Right.
They wouldn't have paid, $700 for a weekend if they weren't interested in this training. And yeah, man, it's super, super rewarding. I mean, it was those people that just really pushed my instructorship and my ability to develop curriculum to an entirely different level. Then they forced me to ascend. They forced me, I'm not going to say I'm self-actualized, but I'm certainly closer to the top of Maslow's pyramid than I would have been without their help. They have forced me to be, they have absolutely brought out the best in my capabilities and taught me so much. And I find the time spent with them far more rewarding than closed enrollment. I mean, I get a lot of feedback from closed enrollment, and it's rewarding when somebody says, hey, that worked. On this day, I came home on a dark night doing this deal, this operation, this meet went bad, whatever. Those stories, you get far more like the actual, the content got validated stories, you get far more of those from closed than open enrollment. But as far as the training process, that with regular people, citizens, that's far more enjoyable, far more.
And I don't know if you found the same thing, but I've also, I've trained some incredibly, you never know who's going to show up to your open enrollment, and it's really weird. Like people ask, what's your demographic? And it's all over the place. People that are interested in this. I've had some of the most unlikely people become friends. I got a CEO of a major corporation who's one of his best training partners is a truck driver. And this guy follows all around. I mean, just guys from totally diverse worlds that just, they bond over this kind of stuff. But what's interesting is you'll have some brilliant people from other fields that'll come in and they'll look at your material and they'll just offer some information, and all of a sudden you're going, wow, that's a really great methodology. I'm going to apply that, or their feedback was such that you didn't think something that for you was probably a throwaway comment. Like 5 or 6 people in the class come back to you and go, hey, that really made a difference, or that did, and so you're constantly changing and going, okay, well, we're gonna improve this. You don't stay legacy. You're constantly trying to get the best methods to, your principles will always stay rock solid, but your methods can always improve. And I found I get far more, not that the professionals, the armed professionals don't give me some great feedback, but my big leaps have been with my civilians who just, they look at things in a unique way that outside of that community, I would never have been exposed to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I never would have, without open enrollment training, I never would, as a, fairly small town Mississippi cop, be able to, teach a millionaire how to fight in his McLaren.
Yeah.
I've never, that would have never happened to me, so yeah, I dig the open enrollment stuff, man. I like it. I like the people. I like the change that happens with them. I've made the remark that, the course, it's a course of instruction and an experience, and the experience is potent. Here's how potent it is. I've had 2 clients have their body. I had a client that went from 420 to 210. I had another that went from 360 to 180. I've probably had 20 people lose 100 pounds. And I don't know how many people I've had lose 30 to 80. I couldn't even count that number. But it's interesting to see the effect that the coursework has. And I didn't I didn't do this initially by design. I kind of just was exercising my own issues, and teaching and training was kind of like therapy to me, trying to replicate a lot of the things that have happened to me in undercover work in a safe way, what we call creating an experience without a consequence.
Right.
And I think that's super important. But the profundity of that experience created all these changes, and that led me to actually my partner. She feed me into some of the work that Brene Brown has done, and a lot of her talks about the distinction between vulnerability and shame. And I kind of realized I was roughly doing some of that stuff just intuitively with a good heart. And when I really started doing a deep dive into what that kind of work actually does and the potency of it, that's when I realized, okay, there's a lot more going on with these people besides learning what we think the best practices are for getting guns and knives out on people in clinches and ground fights and keeping others from doing the same. That's when I realized the potency of the experience and what it was doing to people neurologically and emotionally. That was probably more important than actually what we were teaching them. And I've had a bunch of people, a bunch at this point, come to me and say, and these are their words, not mine, that multiple ShivWorks exposure did for them what 30 years of drugs and therapy couldn't.
Yep.
It sorted their shit out. So I'm not a life coach, and I'm not a therapist. We offer this coursework. We're aware of a lot of these effects. We seem to be doing way more harm than good, and people that actually have piled higher and deeper behind their name tell us we're on the right track. But I don't say that we're fixing mental health or emotional health or anything like that. But there seem to be, with a lot of regular people in particular, because I think a lot of our regular people who come to self-defense come because of trauma. They're there because either they're really interested in it or there's something driving them to take it. Something has put them on the road to self-defense, which resonates with me. Something put me, when I was a child, on the road to self-defense. So that common story of some kind of trauma in the background, recognizing that, managing it, and hopefully the coursework helps this person. That's been an interesting shift over now 22 years of doing open enrollment training. That's been an interesting shift.
Yeah, and
I didn't see that one coming. I really didn't.
Yeah, well, you don't. But what's
What's
great about it though is you're giving your coursework. You're giving it. They came in with whatever they came in with, and after going through your course, you don't even need to know why. All of a sudden, they come back a year later. They've lost 80, 100 pounds. Okay, that's the result. All right, and you were the motivated. Whatever motivated, you don't have to say anything else to that. You provided something that the therapy didn't. It was just a visceral experience for them where the excuses all dropped off, and they said, hey, this isn't, their health is better, all that others, they get all the byproducts that people probably tried to get them to do. But your coursework was just something that really exposed what was happening, if they continue down that path, and the vulnerabilities that has. So that's awesome. I mean, that's great. Not the reason you do it, but
no.
it's cool to get that kind of feedback from people. And, you beyond just giving them great self-protection information, you've also helped them alter their life in a very positive way.
Yeah, man. And that additional benefit right there, that focuses our purpose, like nothing else. Cause I mean, hopefully this person will never have to use any of the shit that we're teaching them. I hope
Yeah,
not.
I know. Yeah,
I
that's the goal, right?
want them to ever have to do that. But man, if they've got all this other positive impact that's happening with them, that's yeah, that focuses our purpose in what we do in ShivWorks even more. And that's another reason I think the open enrollment population is so rewarding. And I do, because I get far more of that feedback from the open enrollment side than the closed enrollment side.
Yeah. The closed guys, when they come back to me and they say, hey, this worked, or this, good feedback. Number one, they signed up for it, meaning they signed up for the job. So you expect them to do, what they're going in with, and you ultimately expect them to do well. So it's not that I discount it, but it's just, but when you hear the civilian that prior to going through your training had the unthinkable happen to them, and they were either to completely avoid it because they read the signs early and got themselves out of there, or the black swan happens, they have to use the information and they were able to save their own life. That's that feedback is incredible, because it happened to a guy that never should have happened to. Really, it's usually, I never know who's going to have to use the information. I can't predict who it is, but it's usually the one person I would say, I hope they get a pass, and
And
they don't.
we've had a couple of regular people, a couple have to use the train. We've had a couple, and to a man, they said the training was harder.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, we're doing that right.
No, that's excellent. So then I want to lead into this, because you said a really funny, I'm not going to say it right now because I want to let you, in case you want to use it, but the current state of the industry, and you and Jeff touched on it. It's almost like the social media super soldier that comes out, and just the proliferation. And listen, a lot of these guys are friends of mine, and they're good dudes, and I get it, but I just, people are overwhelmed, when they're looking at training. And I think it does two things. One, there's this weird hero worshiping that goes on, that is preventative from a normal person seeking out self-protection information, because they think they have to take it to these ridiculous levels. And what I mean by ridiculous is it's a lifestyle. It would have to be a full lifestyle for them to achieve that. And then some of the expectations of everything that you got to do, you got to be able to carry 24/7. You got this. They're not really taking into account lifestyle changes. They're taking into account how they came from, whatever unit they came from, where they're at, where they're living in the world. You train all over the world, just like I did. I can't tell you the number of places that, good luck, I couldn't carry. I didn't have any options like that. I had to adapt to the local situation, and that there's this idea that you're always going to be able, because in your state you're allowed to do all this, that you can walk around. I always tell people, hey, if I could drive around an M1A1 tank, I would. It would be great. It'd be fantastic. But that's just not realistic. I don't know if I'm framing this the right way, but I don't know that a lot of that is necessarily helpful to a lot of people. And I don't know. I'll leave it there and see how you.
Yeah, they're the so the state of the industry.
Yeah.
So let's change that first of all, because it's not an industry, because
No.
industries have standards, right?
Yes.
We're not the automotive industry. We are not the petrochemical industry, and I describe it as a collection of personality driven fiefdoms that are loosely aligned with each other. So we have that. And then we have the social, how people receive their information. More often than not, it's,
Exactly.
on their phone, right, through social media, and the value of that, as far as an information or a learning tool. I think it's questionable. We're actually moving into some online content that's going to be paid content, and I have resisted doing this. But the guy we've hired, Brian, 20 years younger, good Atos comp team, jiu-jitsu black belt, former San Diego cop, former Marine. Brian's been driving this, and from the feedback we get, everybody wants it. So we're going to do it. We're going to do our best at being viable. But yeah, I think it's problematic. You probably heard the phrase entertainment.
Yes.
as far as what is this? Is it training? Is it entertainment? Is it something in between? It's probably something in between. I think there are roughly two kinds of people in our business now: those people who want to be somebody and those who want to do something.
Right.
And I think that distinction is fairly important. I think a lot of people that have gotten out of one career, whether that's military or law enforcement, and they're looking at fame and accolades and money, and at least that's what they think they're getting with this, right? And I think also for them, social media, because the way it is, it feeds people to believe that this business is something that it's not.
Right.
Right. I think that's a part of it too, with video and editing and things that are designed to get a dopamine response. That's what I think. I think a lot of people see that and are like, yeah, I don't want to do that. That guy's life looks cool. I want to do what he does. I can do what he does. I've got a camera, you know. So I think now more than ever, you've got so many choices because so many people have hung out a shingle. How do you find out what's good information, what's bad information? That's a meta question that transcends self-defense, right? That's a question we're struggling with as a society. Can you even trust what you're watching or reading on the internet? Or is it the algorithm driving that?
Yeah.
What's actually real? We don't know that. I think it really comes down to trying to tap into a network of real people with real experiences that ideally and trust, or if you don't, you can observe those people and how they comport themselves online, and then try and get a more informed opinion. I still, we call it the Good Dude Network. That's what we call it, the Good Dude Network. So if I'm a vetted good dude and I have another vetted good dude, and I look at him and I say, hey man, Tim Larkin. And he looks at me and he says, that's a good dude. That's all the vetting I need.
Right.
Right. Versus the same guy when I say Tim Larkin and he says, yeah, I know him.
Yeah, it says it all.
Right.
Yep.
So we call it the Good Dude Network and the Good Dude Barometer. If I get a yeah, I know him, and I don't get that's a good dude. If I don't immediately get that, that makes me kind of perk up a little bit and listen and try and hear what's not being said. I think if people can develop some version of a Good Dude Network and Good Dude Barometer to filter and vet all the stuff that's out there in social media, I think that's really the only way to navigate this stuff, because our business, and again, I resist calling it an industry, our business is problematic.
Oh yeah.
It's really problematic. There are a lot of problems. We've got
it's crazy. It's balkanized. It's nuts.
And there's the people it attracts too, Tim. I mean, there's one of the communities that's firearms centric that I kind of move in and out of. They are struggling with a very well-known instructor that, as it turns out, is a sexual predator and does inappropriate stuff, and did enough inappropriate stuff finally to kind of be outed. And then once he was outed, he was kind of given a second chance and disappeared for a while. And then 4 or 5 years later, the same behavior manifests, and that kind of stuff, right? How do you, when you know there are problems like that in the business, how do you vet information when you want to send, your 19-year-old daughter that's going off to college, you want to get her she's interested in some self-defense training. How do you know where to send her?
Exactly.
That's a real problem. That's a real problem. So it's tricky, man. This is another reason that I do frequent podcasts, and I am very candid, warts and all. I tend not to be PC, and I try and just be myself as much as possible. Because I think this medium right here, where you can actually, if you're interested in an instructor, I think the best thing to do is if you can find some video, long form, kind of like Joe Rogan has made popular, where people can just hear a dude talk. I think that's invaluable. And you can get a sense of that guy's character, that guy's competency, that guy's actual experience. You can factor, you can use that as a way to go, you know, he might be a good dude. He might be.
Yeah, I tell my clients all the time when they show up, I go, I have no idea, you know, people that are first timers. I go, I have no idea how the hell you showed up here. I said, with everything that's out there, I said, something resonated with you and you decided to take a gamble on this. And I said, we really appreciate it. And, you know, and we put the content out. But, you know, the thing too, you said at one point, like a lot of what's being put out there, you got a lot of these guys coming back from the military, and it's hard. It's hard because I have a lot of friends that are operating and have operated for years and they don't have time to do social media. They don't, they're in a different profession, but they're the ones actually doing it. And there are a lot of guys that they may have done it for a while, but they're out there and they're purporting to be like, you know, the superstars and stuff. Nothing against them. They're competent in what they do. It's just their persona is just kind of violates where they come from in some ways. I guess is the best way to say it. But you said something great. Like a lot of these guys are teaching basically wearing full battle gear and just use, I think you said putting a man dress over it. And it's just like for the basic civilian enthusiast that's really coming out. I mean, that's just and the problem is they think that's what they have to do. You know, that's the problem. I hear people all the time, well, I got to do this. I got to be carrying this. I have to have 4 knives on me. I have to have this. And, you know, my whole lifestyle change, which, you know, I understand where that comes from. And I understand that the people that when it was their job, they're actually putting out some really good information in some ways, but they don't understand typical life. You know what I mean? They don't understand,
And also,
the guys coming to them. And so to follow that up, I want you to
I
talk
don't
on
even
that.
know. And on that, that's a great point, Tim. And I don't even realize here's the thing. When you hear a lot of this stuff, do they actually believe what they're saying, or is it an intentional lie by omission? So, for example, the guy who says that the former Green Beret may have served in the SIF is teaching a low visibility pistol course. Okay, what does that dude know about low visibility? Well, you know, I was in the Army for 9 years and had this many deployments, and we did a little bit of low vis. Okay, so just so I understand what low vis is. Does low vis mean you were dropped off in a Humvee, walked 3 blocks wearing a man dress to get into a hide? You took the man dress off, you got your battle rattle underneath, and now you're watching people from a hide, through glass. That's low vis. Low vis is walking 3 blocks, as a white dude, right, wearing a man dress, covering all your battle. You're not low vis. You may be reduced signature, but you're not fooling anybody, dude. Yeah. Everybody knows who you are. They know who you are, right? So, or here's another one I hear a lot. Hey, man, during my first deployment, we were making hits every night. What does that mean? What does a hit mean? What does that mean? Does that mean 3 or 4 times a night, you and a bunch of other dudes who are a tactical version of the NFL are taking a door off the hinges, running through a house, shooting people who are shooting at you, and you're doing that 2 or 3 times a night? Is that what you mean by hit? Or do you mean, kicked the door, ran around a little bit, fuck, there was nobody in there? That's a hit, right? Yeah. I mean, if I want to use that barometer and call what I did in my career in my 13 years of SWAT, I don't know how many of those we did.
Right.
How many dry hole search warrants we did. Well, fuck, there's nobody there. Or we kicked the door and everybody went, oh, yeah. Because again, it's a bunch of jocked up dudes with guns running through, everybody shits their pants and hits the floor.
Yeah.
And we high five about it like we did something and call that a hit and use that to enhance our credibility. That's horse shit.
Yeah.
So even when I hear stuff like that, and I hear a guy, man, we're making hits every night, and he gives that faraway stare, I'm like, and that's why I'm very specific about things, right? When people want to know about my points of experience, and I drive my curriculum with points of experience. It's not exclusive to a single point. Like I told you, I'm 1-0 for an actual gun disarm. Okay.
Right.
That informed me of a lot of the conditions that were present. There were 8 other robberies that I chose to comply, and there's a ton of opposed training that I've done with simunitions, and then more importantly, have conducted to know pretty much now these are the best practices and the way that a gun disarm needs to be trained. This is how I think based on all of that, right? And if I were to say something like, gun disarms, man, you got to live it, and just let that trail off, you could infer that I've taken 7 or 8 pistols away from somebody, right? You can infer that. And that's what I mean. I don't know if a lot of these guys that say this shit are actually believing it, right? Or if it's an intentional lie by omission, or they intentionally misleading people. But here's another thing I look for. Be specific. If somebody says, hey man, this is there are things that I will not talk about online that I will absolutely talk about in person, but I'm pretty much an open book. Somebody says, hey, this is too secret to talk about. That's generally horseshit too.
It's absolute horseshit.
That's generally horseshit too. I mean, I don't name, units and organizations that I do training for online. I don't even name them offline, but I will say this person in this circumstance had this happen. I'll talk about that. So I think that's another way to again, that's a reason I'm a big fan of podcasts.
Yeah.
It's if a dude is, you can get a sense of a dude if he's being himself or if he's not being himself by watching him for an hour. If, like you, the host, just kind of lets shit roll, just lets the guy talk, lets shit roll, guides the discussion.
Because it'll come out. It'll come out.
Come out.
The guy he's got a good 15 minutes. And then the deeper you go, you realize, oh, there's some holes here, or there's some, or he ends up contradicting himself, halfway through. And I haven't had too many of those.
Yeah.
I pretty much know who I'm going to bring on. But I've seen them in other, venues, people and I wasn't surprised with what I saw. My thing is knowing that because I want people to have a sense of this new guy. He's watching this. He likes what he's hearing with you. He goes, man, this guy's real. He's got great background. Also, there's stuff. What is your goal with a new customer, a new person that comes to you, a new student who comes in and they're there because they don't have anything in the box, in the toolbox, and they want to come through. They want to go through your course with the idea of walking out with some really, usable, skill sets that they can walk from. When you look at a new guy, what do you hope that by the end of that 2 days they spend with you, or however many days of your course, what would you like their outcome to be?
So the first thing I want to do to the best of my ability is demystify the realities of a violent confrontation. That's the first thing I want to do, is demystify that, how messy it is, how ugly it is. I refer to the outcome, even with the trained person, as Chigurh's coin. I'm a huge Cormac McCarthy fan,
Great.
And, the scene where Anton Chigurh is talking about the quarter that's traveling to you. And, the old man realizes that Chigurh is essentially death. right? Incarnate, he is death. And that's how mercurial death is. I want them walking away feeling that. That's the first thing. The second thing is I want them to leave with an understanding that heightened awareness and good social literacy will keep it more than likely from getting into the rolling around in piss, beer, and broken glass, horizontal, entangled gunfight, and the importance of living that. I want them to understand the importance of when they've done everything they can do to avoid something, how important it is to move first and seize initiative. And then the worst case scenario, when they're initiated upon, I want them to understand the importance of staying conscious, staying upright, and being able to finish as fast as you can, preferably decisively with a weapon, because I don't teach people how to manage social violence. In fact, you know, the managing unknown contacts module, which is our formalized process for this idea that we've talked about of social literacy, and more importantly, proper verbal boundary setting. So that will take care of the vast majority of the social violence. So everything else is kind of where I live. It's not social violence. It actually is a robbery or an abduction, and the period of time before it goes kinetic is their evaluation. That's pretty much where I dwell, and kind of how to make the distinction between the two. What are the metrics? How do we understand who is benign and who is hostile, and doing the best we can to discern intent on a person who's approaching us in a parking garage or a sketchy gas station parking lot at the pumps at 1:30 in the morning. You know, that stuff, that's what I want them walking away. I don't teach people how to shoot better. I teach them the importance of what I teach is the intersection of all these subdisciplines. I want people walking away with a really distinct lens shift, a shifting of their lens towards an interdisciplinary outlook. I think that's important. Even if it's something like, okay, well, maybe we use the positional aspects of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to stabilize someone. Instead of ground and pounding them, we smack this person once and say, up to you where it goes next. So now we're not just giving people permission once it goes kinetic to pound this person's face into pulp until they can't move. Maybe because we do understand positions so well that I don't have to do that. And maybe it's not right to do that, right? Maybe the right thing to do is, to hold side control, or a knee on belly, look around, pop a guy in the mouth and say, hey man, up to you where it goes next. You're chill. I like that. I like
giving them options.
I like people being able to tap the brakes.
Right.
And not overdrive their headlights. I really like people being able to tap the brakes and switch the problem-solving modality. Maybe he gets a little bit of physical and a whole lot more forceful verbal.
Right.
Understanding that the modulation in force and the available modalities for problem solving, that's the other thing I want them leaving with. And I want to get gun guys in particular away from every problem's a nail. And I have a firearm, that's important. Those are the big ones for me, for a person who's coming to me for self-defense skills. Demystify them, demystify the shit, teach the importance of it not getting there, and give them ways that are trainable and actionable so it doesn't get there. Probably the most important things, if it's going to go physical, make the first move. If it doesn't, a lot of drilling to stay conscious and stay upright and be willing to look at other ways. Maybe what I do is go from fighting to words. Maybe what I do is go from words to a pistol. But understanding that mode switch and being very, very seamless in that transitioning, I think that's really important to do. So those are my big ones, I think, for somebody that's new to me and new to ShivWorks coursework and doctrine, if you will, at this point.
That's outstanding. For the people watching right now, were there any, you mentioned Brene Brown, are there any other unique sources that helped you or you think would be worthwhile for people to check out in relation? Obviously, we're, shivworks.com. We're going to make sure that everybody has access to your information, but you mentioned something like Brene. Is there anything else people should, in your opinion, check out? Maybe something that be a little off the grid?
I like her work. I like the work of Esther Perel.
She's great.
I like her stuff a lot, man.
She is great.
There's so much that she does that is I think important to be a good human, but also there's a lot of stuff that does relate to self-defense again in a lot of ways. I'll tell you another guy who I'm a big fan of, especially for some of the content I'm working on now that I'm going to put out in online stuff. I'm a big fan of Apollo Robbins. I'm a huge fan of him. Apollo Robbins is probably the best pickpocket and hand magic sleight of hand dude on the planet. His lecture, 4 elements of the military and the IC. That guy has some stuff and some things that he does as far as how he draws and focuses and spotlights people's attention and vision that is absolutely phenomenal for self-defense. I do rough, intuitive versions of that, but if you Google him, you watch some video of him.
I'm definitely going to do that. That's great.
He's one of these guys that literally will stand there talking to you and take your watch off, and you'll never realize. A strapped buckled watch, he'll take it off your body. It's really awesome. And the way he does it is, like I said, for doing things like drawing pistols on someone that's holding you at gunpoint. Oh yeah, you can learn a lot from him. I am working on some of that content now. I've got a new module of instruction that's going to be our first exclusive online, because I think I can actually teach this effectively online, because there's not a component of tactility like there is with grappling and stuff like that. Right. This is primarily visual. So I think I can actually, and the other thing too is you can learn sleight of hand online. You can learn a lot of good and actually teach yourself. So I'm pretty sure I can teach this content actually effectively as I would in person. But I'm working on some content called that I'm calling patterned compliance pistol, which is specifically using itty bitty guns like that, like the Kel-Tec 32 right there. Tiny little pistols in novel ways to get yourself out of situations that normally really your only option is compliance. And maybe now when it's not, what else do you got? So I'm working on that content, and that, because I'm hot and heavy on that right now, I'm really looking at a lot of sleight of hand stuff. So I would absolutely say, watch Apollo Robbins and watch what that dude does, and just really kind of let your mind go what the actual implications of that are for self-defense, and they are endless. It's really interesting.
Dude, you've given some amazing info and content on this. I really appreciate it. I was really looking forward to this, and
Yeah, man.
it was just it really delivered. Last thing, just is for people out there. Any last? You're definitely just a solid ethical guy on this, but we can't. As I always say, I can't reach everybody.
Yeah.
This might be the only time somebody hears from you. So, just on a closing statement, is there something that if it was the last time somebody was going to see you, is there something like you'd want them to take away just in life, just how to look at this subject matter, and either why it's worth exploring, or just a life a life lesson that you'd like to leave with them?
I think a life lesson is trying to remind myself that I don't know all the answers. I mean, I come across pretty well. I realize that I'm fairly polished. I talk for a living. But again, at the end of the day, I think we're all imperfect humans who are struggling for grace. And what I try not to do is, again, conflate being good at teaching with being good. And assuming what you do about my character, don't let that carry over into everything. I'm not a life expert. I'm an imperfect person, and I am a work in progress. And I think we all are. And I think it's important that people like me who are in positions to to sway opinion, and change minds. I think it's really important that we be extra careful about allowing people to canonize or deify us. We're just as broken and damaged and come from the same island of misfit toys as anybody out there watching this. And we're giving you what we think. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm trying to tell you the truth as I understand it today. So that would be it.
Yeah.
Don't believe your line on us, and try and be smart, man.
Well, that's what I appreciate about the conversation is you're not trying to be. I see a lot of guys that get into it and they do good work, and then all of a sudden they think they have to give opinions on everything, and they think they have to be motivators, and they have to be, it's just, that's not what this industry is. And I know we use the word industry again, but it is. It's very personality driven. It's enticing. You have to fight the urge to
It
become
is, right?
the guru, because you've got that. And I really appreciate the fact that it's like, no, this is it. I think you used the term basically a gorilla with a gun or something like that along those lines. And yeah, you're not, and I'm not, but I'm also not the answer to everything. I've got some good information. I'm going to share it with you. But
Right.
ultimately, what I always say to my guys, hey, man, I'm not going to be there when this happens to you. I want you to seek out the best information. And I got to say, I really hope if this is the first time people have had an interaction with you, I really hope they seek more information from you, because
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
absolutely, Tim. And I say things, to me, and I agree with you that there are a lot of guys who are knuckle draggers that think they're a life coach with a boom mic walking around on stage giving. That's horseshit. That's not who you are. It's not what you do. You're not a life coach. That's kind of like we all get annoyed when actors opine on politics. Dude, I
Exactly.
don't give a shit about your politics. I just like your movies. Just
Yeah.
act, right?
Yeah.
And every time I find out that you hate guns, it kind of fucks the acting up for me. I don't want
Exactly.
to watch your movies
Exactly.
anymore. We don't
Oh,
want
but
to.
their highest grossing movies are them using guns. I
Yeah, we
mean,
don't want to hear what
it's
actors. We don't want to hear what actors think about politics, and I don't really think, people want or need to hear what freaking knuckle draggers, think about life, love, relationships, and God. I mean, I
yeah,
think those conversations are best had in person, and I'll go into different places and talk about, a little bit of that as far as my own personal experience, but I don't try and tell people how to live. I'm a big L libertarian. I don't try and do that, and that's way out of my way. The last thing I need to do is tell people how to be better people. That's
Yeah.
bullshit. It is. So yeah, that's what I'd say, man, is don't canonize us.
No. Be very disappointed if they saw behind the curtain with me. My kids will tell you everything you need to know. Hey, well, listen, Greg, I really appreciate it. We'll
Okay.
put everything out in the show in the show works, and to everybody listening, shivworks.com. There's lots of content you can pull on Google, and I'll also put the link to the interview that Craig did with Jeff Gonzalez, and I think it's excellent. So again, thanks again for your time.
Tim, thank you, man. Thanks for connecting me with your audience. Thanks for the opportunity. This is long overdue. I've respected you and your work for years, and man, I'm glad to have a new friend.
You got it, brother.
Awesome.